I'm Fred McMurray, which means this must be...
Pillars of Franchising. Pillars of Franchising.
We at the Pillars of Franchising team would like to express our gratitude to FeedSpot for listing us as number one in their 2023 list of top 50 franchising podcasts that you should listen to. Thank you from everyone here at Pillars of Franchising. Okay, so as an update, it's not the top 50, it's the best 50, and I couldn't find my normal hat, so you get the Viking hat. And given what we're talking about, McDonald's laying off a buttload of people, Viking seems to be...
I'll tell you, in being close to Chicago, it's really disturbing. I'm not sure how I feel about giving everybody a hiatus before you drop the axe. I don't know if that's supposed to make everyone feel better. Like, how do you go and relax and unwind and enjoy your family the week before Easter, only to know or not know what your destiny is?
I agree with you. I was actually, when I was walking into the office today, I was talking to one of the other building occupants who actually work for Microsoft. And he actually let me know that he got hacked from in one of the big layoffs with Microsoft. So when I look at all this stuff, there's a couple of questions that come to mind that I'll ask. One, where are we finding employees? I mean, is this going to take us down where no one wants to work? How do we keep, is the long-term employee a thing of the past? You know,
well, that's a great question. It's a really great question. The article I was reading about the whole McDonald's thing was that some are saying the issue with McDonald's is because of the hiring situations, because of the pandemic, what they did was overhire for a lot of those positions. Now, people that I know that have been with that company say there's literally a manager and a director and a VP, and there's layers and layers and layers and layers at McDonald's. And so perhaps you have a little bit of that balancing with all of the different titles upon titles of people. And also, yeah, maybe with all of this staffing crisis that we've been having, they did overhire. And now that some would say we're coming out of it, maybe that's what their situation was. I also think it's interesting. Most of the people, well, actually all of them are coming out of their corporate office that they are laying off. A lot of those jobs, not all, but a lot of them have to do with technology. And if you look at a lot of the tech giants on the West Coast, those are also the kind of people who've been being laid off. And so you kind of scratch your head and go, okay, we've got kind of this convergence of all this AI stuff coming out. We've got all the down the rabbit hole stuff, Fred, that you used to talk about happening, right? And then we've also had this huge influx of young people who've gone to school for information technology and social media, marketing, all these different things. And so it makes me really curious, have we oversaturated those markets with talent only to be replaced by some of this technology? I don't know. And, the specifics of McDonald's, I'll find out soon, because a lot of those folks are my clients who will be without jobs.
So when I look at it, this isn't the first time this has happened. This happened in the late 90s. I remember working for a consulting firm, and COBOL programmers were making $300 an hour because of Y2K. And remote, everyone could work remote. And we had the tech bust, which directly led into, in my head, the housing bust a couple of years later. And You brought up AI. There was an article I saw today that AI is saying, when the newest version of Chat GPT is saying, we can wipe out millions and millions of human jobs. And I keep sitting
Yeah.
there thinking about where we've watched technology. You walk into a McDonald's now, and there used to be dozens of people. Now it's
Yeah.
order at the kiosk. Somebody will come up, and maybe there's a person that walks up to the counter. So when I look at ChatGPT
Right.
saying we can wipe out millions and millions of jobs, I keep wondering who's going to have a job where they can go buy stuff or services from the franchisees. So please,
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting.
boy.
And now what happens? We won't go down the political area, but what happens then if China takes Taiwan and then we can't get the parts that we need, all the chips that we need for all this technology? I mean, it's just like it's like the layers and layers of an onion.
It's like a whole bunch of people screwed up, stuck their heads in the sand for a long, long time, and now crap's coming home to roost. So on that horribly depressing...
It is. Oh my God. I want to say my heart goes out to all of you at McDonald's, and I hope you all, although I know it won't be all of you, I do hope you all get to keep your jobs. And if you happen to be dismissed, I hope you land on your feet. And all of us little people out here who are in franchising in these brands, we're pulling for you.
And that, folks, is what you get from a lot of politicians. So I'm going to say something useful. Go buy a freaking franchise, own a business so you can't get fired. Start your own thing, be a Jerry, and go and find financial freedom, okay? That is useful.
Fight for the little guy.
Otherwise, all we're doing is hope and prayers, and I'm a full believer in prayer, but do something useful. Go out and start your own thing so they can't fire you. On that note now, let us go.
Let's go.
Well, hello. Welcome to Pillars of Franchising. And I'd like to welcome to the show today Keith Gallagher. Keith is my insurance agent, and he's agreed to come on the show. And after Keith spent several years with Liberty Mutual, he made a move to more specialty underwriting company. And then after a couple of years with that company, he decided he had a strong enough understanding of the industry, and he would make a move to sales and the family business, Connor and Gallagher. The company was started by Tom Connor and Dan Gallagher, Keith's father, in 1997, and has grown from the two of them to the second largest independent insurance agency in Chicagoland area over the last 25 years. He focuses on sales and property of casualty insurance and leaning to the insights garnered over his years as an underwriter. The agency has also expanded their services capability beyond strictly property and casualty insurance to include employee benefits, outsourced human resources, payroll, retirement planning, personal lines insurance, and personal wealth management. Welcome to the show, Keith.
Thank you very much, Ray. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
We're excited to talk to you today. It happens to be, as I mentioned before we went live, my renewal time.
Perfect time for a chat.
Yeah, it's kind of like my favorite time and my worst time every year, right? It's like, yay, we're at an anniversary, woohoo. And then it's like, oh, I have to figure out how much insurance is going to cost. And why is it that insurance never goes down?
It's one of those things, unfortunately, we're looking at the cost, particularly here. I know we were talking a little before the show about the Chicagoland area, some of the litigation that's happened, particularly here across the nation as well. But some of those costs continue the get tied up in the courts, and unfortunately, it's reflected sometimes here in the insurance side of things.
Yeah, excellent. Well, welcome to the show. We want to talk about for all of you who are thinking about buying a franchise, those of you who have a franchise, and those of you who are franchisors out there, obviously we are all under the umbrella of needing, no pun intended, of needing insurance. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what are kind of the most common types of insurance that folks need to have when they're in business as a franchise?
Right. So, typically when most businesses are getting started, you're going to think about your package business first. What falls under that is your property. That's if you're a building owner, you're going to have that building covered. If you've got contents in that building, whether it's just your office furniture and computers, or anything beyond into some of your stock, things like that. For instance, your Molly Maid stuff, that'd be your business personal property. I want to make sure you're covered for business income, business interruption insurance in the event you guys were to go down. Make sure you're able to continue to pay those bills in the downtime before we're able to get you back up and running. That's one piece of the package. Then it goes to the general liability side of things, and that's going to cover the third party if there were to be bodily injury or property damage caused by you to a third party. That keeps you covered in that regard. Most businesses, if you have any owned autos, that's another big piece, and that price keeps going up and up and up. And a lot of that has to do with the litigation. Some of that has to do with what used to be a small fender bender that could get kind of pounded out by your local mechanic. Now it's got a camera that needs to be fixed or something of the like. And
That technology,
right?
That technology.
Yep, that's it. And it keeps driving the price, unfortunately. Workers' comp is another huge one, obviously. We want to make sure we've got a safe workplace, but then in the event that something does happen to an employee, I know you guys look at a lot of your employees like family and want to make sure that they're taken care of appropriately. That's a big one. And then, you think too about whether or not do you have an umbrella, and sometimes that might be required of you. Sometimes it just has to do with, what helps you sleep easy at night, and some risk tolerance things there. But those are some of the basics. And then, for instance, there is benefit to having an insurance agent, where we talk about some of those more specialty coverages. Ray and I, as he said, I'm his agent. We were talking about cyber liability. Unfortunately, that's one of those things you hear about in the news a lot lately.
Yeah.
It's almost a matter of when you're going to get hacked and not if. And that's a real bummer to think about, that there's bad actors, but that is a fact of the matter. Another one we hear about in the news very often that, we're talking to our clients about is employment practices liability. That has to do with age, sex, race discrimination, things of that sort. So those are conversations, you certainly would like to be having with your agent, and things you need to be really considering as you're up and starting a business. And if you've got a renewal coming up like you do, Kristin, you want to kind of address, are your limits appropriate, and where do you take things up or lower, and go from there.
Okay. And then Ray, I think you were talking with me earlier about when you're a franchisee, right? The franchisor kind of tells you what you have to have.
Yeah, they do have minimums, and Keith and I have been round and around with Neighborly on that recently, because every dot has to be right there and every T has to be crossed. And they were very anxious about it, multiple emails, going back and forth. And one of the things that Keith was helping me with was the cyber insurance, because the franchise had recommended a particular brand, and it ended up being higher than what we Keith found for us. So, and that's another point I want to make about having a good insurance agent. They're going to be looking out for you. In other words, there's so many nuances about insurance. There's no way that Kristin, you and I could understand every little thing. Sometimes just the placement of a comma and wording of a particular thing will change the entire type of insurance, that whether it's going to be paid for or not.
Yeah.
You have a loss.
Well, yeah, and I think.
And that's where a good agent is going to say, okay, let's put this comma here and let's just change this word a little bit so it means actually what's happening.
Sure. Well, I think the good thing for people is not only are there great agents out here, and Keith is one of them, and thank you for sharing your time with us today. But there are a lot of things that as a business owner, you can control. Right. And do we want to get into a few of those, Keith, about what are some of the things as a small business owner, in particular a franchisee? We know we have to have work comp. We know we have to have liability. But what are some things that you can think of right away that as these people are going, oh my gosh, that's so much insurance, it's going to cost an arm and a leg. What kinds of things can we do to help control those costs?
Right. So I think really what you want to sit down, like you're saying, it's that time of year for you. And a lot of business owners, a lot of franchisees may think of insurance really only at that time of year when the renewal comes up or in the event of a loss. And part of the reason I went into underwriting prior to the sales side was what I'm selling is a promise to you. Like Ray said, making sure that you're covered when that need is there. And, as far as when you're reviewing a policy and when you're coming up for renewal, or if you're starting a new business, you want to start thinking about what is within your control. So you want to start thinking about, if I'm in, the Molly Maid industry, what might be a likely cause of loss? And, for any of your listeners who are out there thinking about starting a franchise, I think they're already off to a good start. They're anxious and eager learners. And so they're thinking about these things. I know you've talked in the past about some of your KPIs, and these are other probably questions that are worth asking the mentors, people like you, is what are common losses that you see? If it's a Molly Maid, again, just as a reference, are you seeing a lot of slip and falls? Might there be, cuts on the job? Might there be this or that? And then how can we control those things, like providing your employees with proper protective equipment, things of that nature, and building a culture of safety really is imperative. And letting your employees know that you care about their health and safety, and that they care as well. So when they're seeing one of their coworkers who might be, performing an unsafe practice, maybe they're, instead of grabbing the step stool like you would hope they might, they step on a chair, and maybe their partner says, hey, why don't we make sure that we're all looking out for each other here? And that helps the business, certainly in the bottom line, but it keeps everyone safe and healthy, so they go home to their families at the end of the day, in one piece, just like they showed up for work. So that's one. And then, you think about things like, as a franchisor, are you checking things like driver's records, when you're hiring? If they're in a vehicle, are they a safe driver? And we want to just make note of, hey guys, we want to make sure, I know Ray is very good about kind of monitoring some of, the driving and things like that with today's metrics. Again, I know we're talking technology, but those things are available to you as a franchisor. Is, are we keeping, safe driving habits, and those things will keep our employees safe, as we go down the line there. You look at vehicle maintenance records, making sure those are, kept safe, that you're not skimping on an oil change and then somebody's got a breakdown on the side of the highway. Or, if it is something where you think maybe we should have got those tires rotated, whatever the case may be. But, those are a few little ones. But really what I think for somebody thinking about starting a franchise, leaning on the people who have been there before, seeing what types, because really what we find in the insurance industry is prior losses are most indicative of future losses. And did you learn from that loss? We call it lessons learned. Or you're going to keep practicing some of those same bad habits that lead to those same similar losses. So, really kind of trying to learn from past behavior, whether that's yours or somebody else in a similar industry, is a key component.
Yeah. Well, I know, like for us, we even talk about, and again, it doesn't have to be a vacuum you're lifting, right? But any object that you're lifting, do you lift it from the very end where it's so heavy, or from the vacuum perspective, we lift it from the very neck, because suddenly it feels like 3 pounds lighter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
In any business that you're in, having weekly safety meetings, right? And making sure you record those so that there's an accountability that we did talk about this, that we're serious about safety. That's been a big deal. And the other thing for people to think about is, if someone is hurt on the job, how quickly can you get them back to work? Not necessarily doing their own jobs, but just in general, so you don't have missed days of work. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. So, we call that return to work program, or light duty perhaps. And, I think drawing back a little bit just to onboarding of a new employee and building that safety culture is, do you have your employee handbook? Has that been up to date? Most people do have a safety manual. And again, are you keeping up on that? And, something that we do here is we have, like Ray mentioned, some other services, HR, where we're reviewing those, making sure we're in compliance, and then having something like a return to work program written, so they're aware, if I am injured on the job and I've got a 10-pound weight restriction, so I can't do my day-to-day duties, what might I be able to do? And maybe that's, back in the office and getting things prepped for the team, getting ready to go out on the road. But not only does that help in keeping costs down for the loss overall, again, for the franchisor, but what it does too is keeps them close to you and knowing that you care about them. So they're not, kind of on the lost island of employees that are just getting paid some sort of comp, 2/3 of a wage and sitting at home, and they feel forgotten about or neglected. And you guys are there to say, hey, we do care. We like seeing you here every day, and we're going to make something work. And having a return to work program is so important for keeping, again, not only those losses smaller for you as the franchisor, but for them as the employee to know I have an employee that cares about me.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And Ray, what do you find being such a big help? Because do you use GeoTab, or what are you using on your cars?
Oh, I've been doing that ever since I could.
Yeah.
So we track everything. But, even if you don't have GeoTab, GPS tracking device, if you just look at the gas mileage that each car, and the people who have the worst gas mileage, which means they're racing up to the stop sign, slamming on the brakes and slamming on the gas pedal, which means they're an erratic driver. Yeah. So they'll have the worst gas mileage. And that's just one indicator. Of course, the GPS tells me, actually, I can tell how fast they accelerate, how fast they take a corner, and how fast they try to stop. So it is amazing what you can find out these days. So that is one thing. But one of the things I think you mentioned, Kristin, you want to talk to Keith about was the experience mod.
Yeah.
Why does it go on so fast and come off so slow?
Yes, tell us about that. I mean, I've been really fortunate to keep a very low mod. Like I'm usually 0.8 or something, low like that. But I don't really know what goes into it and what that means. I think it means I get cheaper insurance, like I get a credit.
Right. So that's a kudos to you and, the way you run your business and keeping a safe place for your employees. A 0.8 is about as low as you'll see. Sometimes you'll just squeak under there a bit, but really, again, kudos to you. And what that is it will be a retrospective look back on your 3 years, not including the current year, of work comp losses. And they look at two things. They look at frequency of losses and they look at severity of losses. Now, typically frequency hits you a little bit harder because they're wondering, hey, we're having a lot of these small losses. Is there something we can do to stop these little ones from happening? Sure. Severity, they do cap you a little bit so you don't get, unfortunately, again, there's some serious injuries that happen on the job, whether that's on the road or, in the field, but they do cap those so it doesn't take you too far in that wrong direction on that experience mod. But what a 1.0 experience mod would represent that you are perfectly average for your industry and your payroll. And so let's say you had $100,000, just to use a round number, of work comp, and you have a 1.0 mod, you're going to pay $100,000 in work comp premium. Now, somebody like you, Kristin, with a 0.80 mod, you're going to pay $80,000 in comp premium for no other losses. Now, an underwriter might like the fact that you've had less losses and they'll apply better credit. So maybe you could even face less than that as far as your premium goes. But somebody on the inverse, maybe they've got a 1.20 mod. They're 20% worse off from a loss standpoint on their workers' comp than the industry average, and they're paying $120,000. Now,
well, what I save in work comp, we make up for in car insurance. Welcome to Illinois.
That's it, 100%. That one's tough. So, but that difference between a 1.2 mod and a 0.80 mod, I mean, we're talking $40,000 there. That's serious savings for a franchisor, whether that means a new vehicle or another employee or something of the sort. Keeping that mod low is something that you have, to some extent in your control, and something you should strive to keep below that one, because again, underwriters are going to fight for your business then because you're an attractive risk to a carrier. So it's really important in that way. And having things like those return to work programs we spoke about earlier, that's a big thing for these experience mods. When a work comp carrier sees that you have something like that in place, you're, again, a much more attractive risk for somebody like them. So the experience mod is one of the trickiest or most confusing things for a lot of insureds. However, with an agent and discussion about how do we keep either those frequency of losses or that severity of losses low, and so you can kind of beat that industry average, you put yourself in such an advantageous position, whether that's bidding your jobs or just having that little bit of extra cash in your pocket. It puts you in a much stronger position.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you because it's obviously, as you know, selfishly, it's my own time to renew. But luckily, Ray invited you, so that was great because it worked out to my benefit and hopefully to the benefit of all of our listeners. Now, everybody who's out there thinking or about to renew is going to want to know how to get a hold of you. So can you share with everybody what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Fred does have my contact information. I believe hopefully he'll be able to share that at the end of the show. But visit our website. It's gocgo.com, Connor and Gallagher OneSource. Like I said, we offer a slew of other services beyond just this property casualty, but please use this as a resource if it is just learning a bit more about it. Or again, I think your listeners, if they're listening to this podcast, I think they are the type that want to know more. And, I'd encourage them to please reach out. And I look forward to hearing from some of them.
Awesome. We are all inquiring minds. We all want to know. And thank you so much. Go ahead, Ray.
Thank you, Keith, for being with us. It's been very informative.
I very much appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely. And we will have all your information posted online. It'll be in the credits of the show. So if anybody needs the information, all of these podcasts, of course, are posted online. So you can always go back at a later date. If this happens to not be your month of renewal and you're like, who's that guy I listened to? They can go back and take a look and find you there. So thank you very much. Good to see you.
Hey, franchise owners. How's your local marketing? Do you feel like you could use some help keeping up with your social media posts and comments and reviews? Do you wonder if you could be doing more to attract local customers? Are you able to identify new move-ins to your local area? At Westvine, we help franchisees like you reach more local customers through digital marketing. With daily monitoring, creative content, and ad placement, and customer data intelligence, we'll get your business in front of the people who want your products or services. We also work with franchisors who need an agency to handle the digital marketing for all of their locations. If you're ready to reach more local customers, give us a call at 805-265-5440 or visit us at westvine.com. That's 805-265-5440 or westvine.com.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Just enjoying our program so far.
Yeah, I was almost going to call you Jerry. And not because the way you look.
I'm also a successful person like Jerry. So, I'm not sure exactly, we're not that similar looking, but
not at all. Not at all. But I happened to look at the thing and I was like, wait. And Jerry's over there laughing. I can see him behind the screen going, oh, she got stumped again. But hey, let's talk about all of this insurance stuff because, it makes me a little bit crazy. And this lovely state we live in makes me crazy. And so I'm always fired up when it comes to like insurance and costs. What can you tell me about kind of the legal side of insurance coverage and why it's so important, especially like umbrellas and all that stuff?
Yeah, I think those are really good questions, because something like an umbrella, which if you're not familiar with that for folks who are listening, what an umbrella does is it's really going to sit above whatever your other policies are, assuming that it's applicable to the other policies, won't sit over everything. And those kind of policies and how you can kind of pair them or match them is really one of the cool things in the insurance world, right? Because, why we all want insurance is because we're worried, right, that we might have a loss or a claim that's bigger than what it is. And, specifically in our franchise world, right, where we all kind of relate to, we're always worried about that with our customers, and we're worried about it with somebody getting in, right, with the cyber liability. So, there is a lot of reason to have the insurance, even if it does, produce a lot of headaches sometimes to get it right.
Can you give me an example, or our listeners an example of where, let's say, for example, one of my girls were in a car accident and unfortunately somebody was very seriously injured. How does, say, an umbrella policy help protect me and my family?
Yeah. So in that situation, assuming that, you have a business auto, which is already covering the people who are driving, right? And Keith, feel free to chime in here because I'm sure you have thoughts too. He's like doing the answer. Right? And so you start out with having, you have to have coverage, obviously, that having automobile coverage for, your girls, the people who are doing the cleaning, right? And then, you want to make sure that you have enough coverage to cover, what if you guys are at fault, you want to start with like basic coverage, you have underinsured, all these other layers, right? It's like a cake. And then when you get to the umbrella side of it, that's really there to pick up, anything that might be really, really bad, right? If someone was paralyzed, they have loss of future income.
Right.
Keith, anything you want to chime in with about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think particularly on the commercial side, right, you've typically got $1 million auto liability limit. Now, again, the way litigation's gone in today's day and age, that million might run out awfully quickly. Let's say there's a family involved, as you mentioned, future loss of income, things of that nature. The umbrella sits over the top of your liability policy. So whether that's the auto liability or the general liability or even the employer's liability. But it's again, a bit of a risk tolerance, what makes you feel comfortable at night. And you do have to have these conversations probably with your agent to see, is another million over the top to give me 2 million total enough to make me feel comfortable? Or might I want another 5 million umbrella to make that 6 or what have you? Start looking at maybe values of your business and the assets you want to protect from bankruptcy, perhaps, things of that nature. That's where you want to start thinking about your umbrella limits.
Well, then you have an umbrella that protects you privately, right? I mean, that was kind of the one thing.
Right, that's even the next layer, right? You're ahead of the game. So what we started with was, okay, like a business auto and then business umbrella. And then where you went was, okay, well, what happens if I get sued not only as my business, but I get sued personally? Right.
Because people who own businesses have to think of that. I mean, you can feel it in the atmosphere from something as a clean that went bad, and everybody wants their money and then some for their time, and they missed a day of work and they want. So there's an environment out there that I think as a business owner kind of puts you on the defensive, and you feel like you have to really protect yourself because you don't know what's going to happen next or who's coming after you.
Right. And you don't know. And you don't know what the claim is going to be, right? There's very creative, personal injury attorneys and other kinds of claims out there. And that's not to say that people who actually are harmed don't deserve anything. They do. Right. But it is something where, we all have heard of folks that take advantage of knowing that someone has insurance, and we have to be prepared for that. So, I would certainly recommend having all the kinds of insurance, a personal umbrella as well as a business umbrella. I'm a self-professed, self-claimed, self-admitted dork, right? I was one of the 10 people in my year at law school who took insurance law, right? And it's a fascinating area because it's all about coverage disputes and what's covered and was this in there? I mean, I know other attorneys who do, they do insurance coverage litigation, right? Which Keith probably knows what that means, but the rest of us don't. And that means that they literally are there fighting with people who are claiming that they're insured, and the insurance company says, no, we never said we'd cover that, about whether something is eligible even to be under the claim, right? So even if you think you had it, I can think of one example where, there was a business owner, and this is why it's important to have a good agent. Okay. Someone who actually knows what they're selling. Okay. Because this one is a little scary, right? There was a company that did kind of like excavation and like earth moving. Okay. Like before you would go and build a house. Right. And they were supposed to, as part of their services, get the earth to be compacted in a certain way. So that way there wouldn't be a lot of shifting. Okay. Some shifting is natural, but not an excessive amount. And, eventually they did have a claim, right? And, they're responsible business owners like you're describing, so they immediately, showed it to their carrier, said, and they've paid for this insurance for, I don't know, 10, 20 years. And then they got into a coverage dispute. And eventually, it was found that they never had coverage, even though they had paid on this policy for 10 or 20 years. And this was their entire business. Right. Wow. This was like the one thing that really mattered. Yes, it mattered that they had workers' comp and it mattered that they had other things, but ultimately this was the service that they provided.
And it wasn't coverage.
Right. So it's really important to, in that situation, that's another reason that you might want an umbrella, it's like another backup. So you just don't know.
Let's hit one last point. And this comes from Ray's discussion. Why do you think it is that you start to find the larger, and I may be speaking out of turn, but I'll just say in our case, the larger a franchise or a franchise system becomes, the more complicated, demanding, inclusive of the insurance policy is required? Why is it so much more now than?
There's probably 2 or 3 easy reasons for that. One is that they're big enough that they can hire staff to actually police it. Because at the early days, they aren't making enough money that they can hire someone whose whole job it is to bug you.
Right. Okay.
Right. Delete. It's like, the IRS wants to have more tax collectors. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, we know what their job is going to be.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
There's no disguising that. But one of the other reasons is that as franchise systems get bigger, the franchisor will also find itself getting sued, even though they are not the operating business. Okay. Because consumers don't really understand the franchise model. They don't understand that, these are not the same, right? That the neighborly is not the same as, your businesses or Ray's businesses. And so they will sue at that level. And they will, and the franchisor can typically get that dismissed. But one of the other protections that they have is that they are usually required to be what's known as an additional insured on pretty much every policy almost that they can get. Okay. Yeah. And that really gives them a lot of protection because now they have the same insurance essentially that you do. And it's not a huge additional cost. I mean, I typically hear, and Keith, or you can chime in and tell me I'm wrong, but it's usually like an extra $100, $200 per policy to add the additional insured. So, again, it's a cost of doing business. Sure. But I think that if they don't have, they don't have people there to police it and enforce it, they're not going to pick at you about it. And if they aren't getting sued, they're not going to care as much because they aren't feeling the risk.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, for all of you out there who are starting your business plans and you're trying to figure out when break even is, this is one of those really good topics to validate, because if you don't validate with someone who is in your state, who has the same car insurance issues that you might have, who doesn't have the same work comp issues. Illinois and California surprisingly are very similar, but if you go to Iowa, that might be completely different. So when you're validating and you're trying to build this break even in this budget for yourself, make sure you validate, make sure you get the right information so you have proper inputs. Laura, thank you so much for all your help and the hard work you do for us here on the show. And we look forward to talking to you again next week.
Of course. Thank you. Good to be here.
As usual, thank you for joining Pillars of Franchising. We appreciate every single one of you. We want to give a shout out to our sponsors, the Titus Center for Franchising at Palm Beach Atlantic University. You can find them on the college's website. Also, Franchise Show 247, which can be found at franchiseshow247.com. We couldn't do without our sponsors, and we appreciate their support. Don't forget, we love to have calling guests. Our number to call in is 323-580 5755. That is 323-580-5755. If you have questions for our guest or for any of our Million Dollar Mentors, we welcome you to call in at any time on the show. We will do our very best to answer your calls. Stay tuned, more coming up.
Oh, hey, Laura.
What's up? How are you again? I'm glad we're back. Oh, now it's
there we go. I was like, I had to take off my glasses. I thought it was in Groundhog Day.
You were confused again. But Jerry and I again.
That's fairly hilarious, Fred. Well done, my friend. Well done. I noticed Karen anxiously staring at the screen just like I was because we weren't entirely sure who was coming on. And then Laura came back on. So you threw a curveball to it.
You know, the reality is it's all about keeping you guys engaged and on your toes so you don't take a nap. Right, Ray?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, with all this engaging conversation, nobody should be taking a nap anyhow. I mean, learning more about insurance if you're a business owner is critical. And certainly the legal side that Laura brings to us is something that we all spend a lot of time and money on. So this is like free advice. Although it did cause me a bit of concern to hear her describe an insurance coverage class as fascinating. I mean, I'm stretching my imagination a little bit, but I suppose there are some people who really get into that stuff.
You know, we all find things that we all like, right? I am okay with being my nerdy self. It works out.
You know what? Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, we're all glad you do it, Laura. Thank you. I just had to give you a bit of a hard time on that. But so, Kristin, what are we going to talk about today? I have so much fun stuff that I can talk about.
Oh my gosh. So, Jerry, last week we talked about all the great work that you did down in Washington, D.C., how much fun you had and how exhausting it was. But the week before that, we started on our discussion about why franchisees should be joining IFA and what is really in it for them to become a part of IFA and some of the programs that you're working on to help get not only the engagement, but really the critical knowledge to franchise owners and how IFA can help.
You know, there's a long list of reasons that franchisees should get involved. The educational side of it is huge. You know, no matter how good your franchisor might be, there are gaps in your knowledge as a business owner, as a franchisee that you can many times get filled through the education that IFA has to offer. We talk quite often of the connections. You know, I've got connections all over the country in different brands now. So if I run into an issue with my business, I've got lots of experts that I can reach out to, and that all is because of IFA. But, you know, one of the things that the reason I got involved to start with, and is all related to engaging my representatives in Washington, D.C. in conversations about franchising and small business overall. And what you learn if you talk to them very long is there is, out of all of our representatives and senators in Washington, D.C., there's probably like 5% that have ever run a business or had anything to do with running a business. And yet all of them are voting on and speaking out on issues that impact our businesses. So for me and you and many other people to go to DC and have some opportunities to sit down with our elected officials and educate them, you know, really help them understand what goes on in our business. Right now, I was on a call this morning. Right now, they are taking a look at the guidelines about the relationship between a franchisee and a franchisor. The FTC is looking at adjusting some of those rules. And, you know, the relationship you have with your franchisor is critical. And there are bad franchisors and there's bad franchisees. They don't always swim in the same pool. Sometimes the bad franchisees are for really good brands like yours and mine, but for whatever reason, maybe they don't follow the system. Maybe they're struggling for some other reason. Or if you're with a brand that is just not a great representative of the franchisor, that causes problems. And then those issues go to the Capitol. And then they start making, you know, new rules, new regulations related to franchising based on what a minority has run into rather than the rest of us. So helping them understand that it is a minority and that more regulation is not necessarily the answer and may actually hurt the franchise industry is, I think, critical. So that's why I do it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's actually a really good point because, I always say on the show, oh, I hate politics. I hate politics. But, the honest truth is when you're in business, you have to at least understand some of these policies that they're putting forth because they do have a direct impact on how you run your business. And quite frankly, the bottom line is whether or not you make money.
Well, there's an old saying that you may not have interest in politics, but politics has an interest in you.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's really where we're at. So, if you become a member of IFA, you automatically would become a member of the FAN, which is the Franchise Action Network. And if there's something going on in DC or in your state that impacts, your business, or related businesses, other franchisees' businesses, because we kind of all hang together and help each other and protect each other, you would get an email through FAN. And they would say, this is what's going on. They educate you. And then they say, IFA, because of whatever reasons has come down against this, or we are trying to suggest that the Senate take a different look at this and maybe adjust it a little bit. Would you please contact your representative? If so, here's the information to do it with. Literally, they give you a link. They give you a formatted letter that you can fill in and adjust and edit and do whatever you want to that's already addressed. So they make it very simple to be engaged. Yep. Not everybody has to go to Washington, D.C. like I do a couple times a year and spend 3 or 4 days there talking to people. You can do it quite easily through this. So IFA is exceptionally valuable to a franchisee and a franchisor and the suppliers to that group, because that gives us the opportunity to have a say in kind of what the guidelines are for our business.
Excellent. Well, Jerry, again, I have to tell you, I really think for those who don't get involved, and obviously, listen, so you maybe you're a smaller franchisee and you really can't take the time away from your business or your family or financially, you can't go to Vegas to this big shindig, okay? That's not all required. Where else can people get information about the events and some of the training from IFA?
Well, to go to IFA.com, that's the simplest thing to do. And it will open up a magical wonderland of information. Really, you have almost limited educational opportunities. They will, there are emails, there are texts, there's a variety of things that come out to you, perhaps daily in some cases, if something's really hopping on the hill. Last week, I got a little bit of a frantic email that Arkansas was changing or talking about changing the relationship between a franchisor and a franchisor, which was based on franchisors making bad decisions and franchisees pushing back. There was not a discussion between the two sides to mediate that. It simply was the franchisor came out and mandated something, the franchisees pushed back, which meant the franchisees inevitably called their state representatives, and it turned into a big deal. So we had to get involved. IFA got involved, and they helped educate the representatives in the state of Arkansas, and then mediated an agreement that would be factored into the bill that they were putting in place that would take care of the issues that the franchisees had, but not necessarily, I'll just put it this way, screw up the relationship for every other franchisee and franchisor out there. And I literally reached out to Great Clips franchisees and told them what was going on. I sent them my thoughts on it and asked them to use one of the pre-formatted letters and send something to their representative. The franchisor, several franchisors, I think there was 40 or 50 franchisors that sent information. This is all generated by IFA. And by the way, when you're a franchisee, your membership is free.
I think that's really important to know because, again, there's so much information. And, Jerry, I watched the full few hours, 2.5, 3 hours that you sat there. And it really was amazing how many people that serve in our government really just don't know. But I was kind of happy to see, I believe I counted 3 of the gentlemen there that actually owned franchises. And then the one gal, while I didn't necessarily agree with her thoughts, she was a lawyer for franchisors.
Right.
At one point. And so at least you've got some educated, 4 out of how many?
Right.
very small slice of the pie, but to at least get involved and understand who the people are that represent you, so you know how and or if they represent you and your state and what you're fighting for appropriately. So thank you so much for all the work you're doing for us. Obviously to Matt Holler for leading the IFA right now. He's doing a great job, and there seems to be a lot of flurries of activity going on constantly. So thanks for keeping us up to date on all the happenings in DC and with the IFA.
No problem. I'll have more in the future. Thank you, Kristin.
Thank you, Jerry.
Oh, hi, Karen.
Hi, Ray.
Hey, I've been thinking about our topic today, and I wrote down some words, and I'm just going to say these words because I know that we could probably go an hour talking about this. It's such a fantastic subject, and that's employee retention. And then I'm just going to throw these words out to you. So open, transparent, recognition, rewards, and open door policy. Now, we could spend probably the whole day talking about this stuff, but give me your thoughts on those.
Oh gosh. Okay. So got to slow it down a little bit.
Open and transparent.
Open and transparent. Absolutely. When we talk about retention, right? We talk about retaining employees. How do we keep them? That's a key piece where we want them to feel like they're really part of the culture, that they're right, that they're part of something. And if we have that transparency, and if we have the open environment, the openness, they're going to feel like they're part of it.
That's right. That's part of the team.
Absolutely.
And that's the best way to keep people engaged with you, is to let them know what's going on. There's no reason. 90% of the things that people keep a secret of, there's no need to. It works really well just to keep your people informed, and that's part of having an open door policy. One of the things I always hated working for other people is, I got to go see the manager or the vice president or something, and I got to make an appointment, and I got to knock on the door, and
right. Because they're closed up in there. What's going on?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of franchisees will say, business owners will say, well, I don't want to be that transparent, because if I really tell the truth, then I might not be able to keep them. And as we've talked before, that people are going to fill in the blanks. They're going to fill it in. So it's always about where it's be truthful, be transparent. And if you have a strategy, if you could say, here's what's going on and here's what we're doing about it. And if they see you've got a plan and you have a strategy in place, many times, and how they can then play into that strategy as well. No matter what level the employee is, it's important, for them to see that.
And not only that, if you're honest with the employee, they're going to be honest with you. I mean, it's not that difficult for an employee to say, yeah, I hurt myself on the job.
Right.
Okay? But in reality, they were out jitterbugging with somebody and twisted their ankle.
Exactly.
So they're going to be more honest with you if you're honest with them.
So what were the second words you said? The second set of words.
Recognition. And I think that's a big thing. That's one of the biggest things they talk about is, and I'll give you an example of what we do in our office. So each one of our teams has a space, okay? And above that space is a whiteboard. On that whiteboard, we recognize their birthdays and anniversaries. But when a client calls in and says, you know what, team number 6 did a fantastic job. We love our team. We write that on the board. Now, what happens is, of course, that team sees that on the board, but all the other teams, as they come in, they see that on the board.
Right.
So that is, public recognition. Now, of course, sometimes, we have the opposite happen. We don't put that on the board. We may see a manager, okay, and then we talk to them privately about what may have happened.
It's one of the things that in consulting with franchisees, consulting with business owners, it's one of the things I talk about. It's having you mentioned like I call it recognition and appreciation, because those really they go hand in hand. And it's important to have, it sounds kind of silly, but it's important to have a strategy around it and say, what is my strategy as a business owner, as a franchisee, and making sure that also it's people sometimes they want they want different things too. So putting the names on the board, that's part of it, right? I think also it could be having lunch with you.
Absolutely.
So there are different ways, and it's not a one size fits all. So it's understanding really what motivates people and really playing that into the strategy. Because I think it's one of the things as we get busy, it's an easy thing to forget or think it's kind of fluffy. When actually it's one of the key things. I mean, research shows, I was looking at a research study recently where 41% of employees, I guess it's 41% of employees when they were surveyed that they'll stay based on that recognition, based on that appreciation. So having that culture, it's such an important part to retaining people.
And part of that recognition is the reward part. Okay, so as an example, we have in our office a reward called Martha Bucks, which was named after my deceased wife. And so every time they get a compliment or any positive thing, they earn Martha dollars. And with those Martha dollars, we go out and buy perfumes and things that ladies like, and they're on display for them to purchase with their Martha Bucks. So they have a chance to and the more compliments they get, it becomes exponential, and they can earn more. So and we have several rewards like that allows the ladies to be recognized for what they do.
Love it. All right. So were there any other words you had? And then I'll add a couple of mine to that.
Open door, which we just kind of touched on. And, that's basically keeping your door open.
Yes, exactly.
I think the ladies love to walk into my office and chit chat for a few minutes, and I keep the door open. I can see everybody coming and going, and they always say hi to me, and I always say, hi back. Okay. That little bit of communications is very important, that they know they can talk to me, quite frankly, about anything.
So I'm going to add two more. To your list.
Okay.
Okay. So one is we're hearing a lot about stress and like burnout.
What?
Like
say it again.
Stress and employee burnout. People talk about, I'm burned out. We're burned out, many times because of COVID and everything that's been happening. And a lot of what's happened then is people are talking a lot about workload. I've got such a high workload. And so one of the things that it's really as a franchisee, taking a look at that and saying, okay, what can I do to help reduce that employee burnout?
Right.
And a lot of the burnout, it's interesting, comes with even some of the things that we've talked about, right? Things like making sure that it is, what's the workload? And it's not just saying, okay, we'll give you a couple of days off, because when they come back, what is their workload still? It could be communication, right? It could be how we're handling stress. So it's really, as a franchisee, taking a look at all that. And it's not just, let me just give them some extra time off, but taking a look at really what contributes to that burnout as well. So I think that's a key thing, because people leave many times because they say they're burnt out.
Yeah. One of the things that happens sometimes in our office is each one of our employees, of course, accumulate vacation time. And sometimes they want to purchase that because they need a little extra money. And I try to discourage that, because I know that they need the time off to relax.
Right.
And if they don't take it, it's going to hurt them probably more than it's hurting me. I mean, it's actually to my advantage if they want to buy it, because they're still working and they're still earning money. But they do earn their, we pay them for their vacation. So I kind of discourage it, although I understand that sometimes there's an absolute need to have to purchase their vacation time.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the things I insist on, is people take at least like a week at a time vacation, because I think that's where we can really get burnt out. So
absolutely.
The last one I hear a lot. I hear this a lot with retaining employees, and it's the key word of flexibility.
Oh, yes.
And that's also can be a real hot button, because we had COVID, and a lot of people, their employees, they worked off site, right? They were virtual. And then as they're trying to bring people back, and then employees are saying, well, I want flexibility, so I'm going to leave if I can't work off site. And then some of the franchisees are saying, well, no, I need to have you here. So kind of what does that look like? Because they think flexibility, it's just where you work. Yep. Many times flexibility can be, because many times you can't offer that. Right. You need people in the office. So the word flexibility comes into how can we as franchisees be flexible in creativity, practice some creativity in, does somebody work different hours? Do you have job sharing? So it's kind of thinking about it more open-minded, being more open-minded about it and thinking about what that flexibility looks like versus I'm in the office or I'm not in the office.
Yeah, many of our employees, my employees, have children, and they need the time off because of parent teacher conferences. They need to take them to the doctor. They get called from the school, and we always will accommodate that, because that's an important part of their lives.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you'd be surprised at the number of organizations or companies don't allow that. And as small business owners and franchisees, this could be a part of our secret sauce, because we can offer this and we can really make it a competitive advantage.
I like that, secret sauce.
Yeah, you like that? Yeah, because that's what we're doing, right? And we're in the war for talent, and we're competing against a lot of people. So what are some key things we can do to get practice creativity so we can actually attract employees and we can retain them?
Absolutely. Karen, it was a pleasure talking with you.
You too. Always fun. Always fun to bring up new ideas.
Yep.
You two are so cute together. Thank you all for joining us on the show today. And thank you to our guest, Keith Gallagher with CGO OneSource. As always, we appreciate Pillars of Franchising mentors Jerry Akers, Karen Kimsey-Sword, Ray Pillar, and our franchise lawyer, Laura Liss. Okay, so you think that's not a mouthful? Just try saying it. And last but not least, a shout out of thanks to our producer, Fred McMurray. I am Kristin Selmeczy, your fourth franchising mentor. And this has been another episode of Pillars of Franchising. Join us again next week at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. And remember, the dream starts here. Have a great Easter weekend.